Hotapu everyone. This is His Royal Majesty Ra Sumaba Ifagbemi, the world's first openly African black gay king. And the role of a king is to nourish and protect his people. And today I do so by discussing a very under-discussed topic in the black gay community, which is the black gay community's mental and emotional health. Everyone in the world needs mental health and emotional fulfillment. Every single person on the planet needs to have that. In fact, according to our teachings, man is a mental creature. He's the only creature on the planet who has unlimited mental power. He can think or she can think about anything, anywhere, anytime. There's no place, no thing that the human mind cannot mentally reach. So mental health is the core to being a human being. So, mental health, as we know it in the West, in the white cultures, is primarily an economic issue. That in the West, in the white cultures, white people built white cultures, and they favor white people in those white cultures. They're going to always favor, as a group, their group. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you understand that every other group has the exact same right to the same level to build for their group and favor their group. This is true of everything in the universe. Everything in the forest survives for itself, favors itself, thrives, and then contributes to the rest of the forest. But first, it must survive and thrive. So, in the white people's world, they have a way that they like for mental health issues. White people are what we call Sebek. White people belong to the planet Mercury to us and the planet Pluto. So we call Sebek, Mercury, and Pluto is called Set. So the white people, what we call Sebek or Set, communities, like to work with those parts of their brain. Sebek is the verbal part of the brain, and Set is the mammalian part of the brain, the mammal. So when you look at how white people approach everything in their lives as a group, as a culture, you will always see the signature of Sebek and Set, Sebek and Set, Sebek and Set. It will always appeal to words and intellectualism and to emotionalism. But it's a kind of, the emotionalism is a very Sebekian emotionalism, a kind of what we call stiff, a kind of stiff emotionalism. But primarily, they like to fix their emotions through Sebek, talking. So their modules of therapy and counseling lean towards talking. You go to a therapist, you go to a psychologist, psychiatrist, you sit and you talk. That's the whole module. Then you're given drugs. It's a very passive approach. The client is quite passive, except in the sharing process, but otherwise quite passive in the healing work. The doctor does all the work. The doctor does all the processing. The doctor does all the prescribing. So this kind of separation of client to his own healing, where the doctor becomes everything and the client kind of sits there passively, more or less. There's some work done by the patient, but it's minimal. This separative approach to healing is very white to us, to black people. Even in white people's religions, they are very verbally oriented. Scriptures, sermons, talk, reading the book of their traditions. So if you're going to talk about Black people's health, the first thing you have to make sure to understand is that it must be suited to the Black nature. What I'm saying here is that you can't erase your ancestors. You may try, whether you're white or Black or Asian, whatever you may be, but you can't do it. To Africans, your ancestors are as much a part of you as your breath, your legs, your nose. You can't erase your DNA. It's there. And the DNA contains DNA cell memory, forged by generations of your people. So, mental health for Black gay people must first look at how Blacks in Africa dealt with mental health. Even though many Black people, let's say in North America, are both in time and space, meaning 400 years removed from deep connections to Africa, and can be thousands and thousands of miles from Africa. What I'm saying is that despite 400 years of being not near there, and despite the fact of being thousands of miles from there, the DNA is still here. The memories are still here. So if you're going to create or design a mental health, emotional wellness system for Black people, I am telling you, you must incorporate the ancestral dynamics that underpin all Black people. Black cultures may be different in Africa on the surface, but their patterns are universal. That's a very important detail. Because in order for my kingdom to really heal the stresses that Black gay people go through, the stress of being Black, the stress of being gay in a white world, in a hetero insecure, what they call homophobic world, the stresses of coming out, the stresses of dealing with the Black gay church, the stresses of dealing with ignorant parents, ignorant friends, the stresses of the modern gay sexual mating rituals, online hookups and unsafe sex, and I meet you and then we have sex 5 minutes later. Those are very dangerous, high-risk activities. Whether it's physically dangerous, you can get herpes, gonorrhea, syphilis, HIV, or it could be emotionally dangerous. You can get your heart broken, you can get robbed, you can get stabbed. It's very serious, the level of stress. And no one outside of the Black gay community can create an efficient Black gay healing system. It must come from one of our own. It must come from within our own community, because only we understand our experience. So we've left the white world and entered back to Africa, and that's where our conversation will now continue. So, in order for Black gay people to have mental health and emotional wellness, we turn to Mother Africa. On the screen here you see what many would call a goddess. That's what barbarians would call her, or foreigners would call her, foreigners to our system. But let me be clear what a goddess or god is. A goddess or god is a part of your brain. Leave it at that. You'll hear many people say, our word, for example, in Rinkam or ancient Egyptian for god or goddess is Neteru or Neterut. But let's be clear what that word means. It means really one of two things. I would not go beyond these two definitions. It means a part of your brain or a formula of science. Surely one could say the Neteru are forces of nature, principles of nature. That is true. But that's not really useful to you in the immediate part of your life. That may be true later down the road, more so, and more important down the road. And it has some relevance in the beginning, but not much, not as much as people are stressing. It's far more useful if you think of what you see on the screen here, this beautiful goddess we call Nit or Net, as a part of your brain, a scientific formula that rules a part of your brain. Now that's useful. And if you can get to that level and you learn all the Netteru, that means you've learned to control all brain centers. So what is she, besides being breathtakingly beautiful? If you are finding her stunning, this means you are in love with the part of your brain that she symbolizes. We drew the parts of our brain as works of art. It's a very simple and direct message. Your brain is beautiful. We drew the formulas of science as works of art, saying living scientifically is an art, and it's beautiful. Already, you see how we're not in a white context. White people don't show their mental states or their emotional states or their brain centers as art form. They'll give you some brain shot, and here's your amygdala, and here's your pituitary gland, and they'll talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And that's great for white people, but I'm not white. And that does not work for me or my people. For black people, this works. She will do the job. Because black people have a DNA, an ancestral DNA of art as the way to enlightenment. Enlightening what? Your brain. They say raising Kundalini. To where? To the crown chakra. Crown chakra. What does that mean? It's a fancy way of saying, or if you're an ignoramus about spiritual truths, you pretend you know what you're saying. Oh, my crown chakra. What it really means, if you really done it, not read a book about it, not done a workshop on it, or taken a quote-unquote shamanic class on it, if you actually done it, you'll realize it simply means energizing the brain centers. The crown chakra is your brain. Awake Kundalini rising is awakening your brain. So, she is the part of the brain that processes stories, myths. I call them mythins, myths inside of you, mythins, mythology. She is the part of your brain that responds to all stories. Whenever you hear a story about anything, a nursery rhyme, a person's life story, The Matrix, Harry Potter, the Book of the Dead, the story of how water becomes clouds, that you learn in science class. Whatever story you hear, it is this part of your brain symbolized by NIT that is processing that. So the first thing to understand about mental health and emotional wellness, each group on the earth have their own stories for that group's approach to mental and emotional wellness. This is very important. If you are a psychologist or psychiatrist, and I work seriously with psychologists and psychiatrists, I help them to amplify their healing and counseling methods, particularly with Black people. We show here through this goddess that everyone has a story, and everyone's story has variations, differences, inflections, cultural inflections. So, in order for you to have mental health, you must know the story of your mind, how the mind came to be. What is a mind? So, she's the goddess of philosophy, she's the goddess of explanation, she's the goddess of constructs and mandalas and tables that explain things, that give the storyline. She's called a weaving goddess because you weave a tale. Also, the aspect of a story is that it creates patterns. When you, there are chapters and there are patterns and there are behavioral patterns. When you weave a cloth, you create patterns. So the implication of her in you, your brain center called knit, is that you are knitted. You are a beautiful leaf or a beautiful curl in a large pattern. And unless you know your story, first the story of what? The universe, why it is, what its purpose is, what is the story behind that? What's the story behind why you exist? What's the story of your existence? What's the story of your life on earth? You have to have these stories in place in order to have mental health. That's why when the white terrorists came during the great perversion called slave trade, when the white terrorists came, among the first things they did was kill the priests and priestesses. They stabbed the religions. So we'd forget our stories because the stories give you mental strength, not just mental health, but mental strength. And when you're mentally strong, you can fight the terrorists. Those white terrorists from Europe, Spain, France, England, Belgium, and the Congo. So without your stories, particularly if you're Black, there's no helping you. You will not get mentally healthy. It's impossible. You will be fragmentally healthy, but not completely healthy in the mind. Just bits and parts of your mind will be healthy, other parts will be rotten and crumbling. Sebek likes things to be broken into pieces. We say we break a rock on the ground and there's Sebek. And each shard thinks it's all by itself and was not part of a whole and just take care of itself and it's all good. So when I deal with talking with psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, advisors, personal motivational speakers about mental health and emotional happiness, I've coached many to begin to help people understand their story. We have a need for a story. The brain needs them. It's not a choice. That's why no matter how little you are, at some point you want to hear stories. Every child has something in them saying, Mommy, Daddy, tell me a story. Read me a story. Who's saying that in their brain? It's her, knit. So when black people follow a Christian or Jewish story, Jesus was a Jew. That's a Jewish story. That is the story of the Jews, the Bible. That's not an African story, it's a Jewish story, which then became a white people story. The Europeans were drawn to that storyline for many political purposes, starting with Constantine and the Holy Roman Empire. But that story is not an African one. It will not really feed the African mental health. You may ask, well, then why are so many black people Christian? Well, that's a long conversation. It's amazing what terrorism can do to someone, bullying and abuse can do to someone. We did not come to Christianity willingly. We were tortured into it, raped and brutalized into it. So that's another conversation. But there's another reason why it persists, why many black people, despite common sense, are following the story of their oppressors. That's because the Bible pilfered many storylines from many cultures, particularly from ancient Egypt and the Middle East. The Bible's a hodgepodge of a string of tale from this myth line and a string from that line, and they took all these strings from different cultures, wove them into another pattern, and called it this book. So when black people hear the stories, let's say, of Jesus, they recognize the African basis of it, the root from whence they got that storyline, which was from Osar and Heru. Ast was the virgin mother. She had an immaculate conception of the savior child called Heru. And that Osar died and was resurrected. So the resurrection dynamic, the savior dynamic, the immaculate conception dynamic, all came from Africa. The whites took parts of the story, whitewashed them, and then resold them back to black people. So when we are seeing a lot of black people praising Jesus, what I see is the memory of Heru in a very watered down foreign version. So what I say is, why go to the facsimile? Why go to the Xerox copy of the story? Go to the original story. Go back to Africa. Go back to Heru and ask the first Virgin Mother. So the white terrorists were very deliberate, very, very deliberate in ripping us from our stories, our myths, our legends, our gods' tales. Then having stripped us of our African tales, infected us with a twisted, watered down, politically manipulative version that made the whites look like gods and us their servants. It was all very sneaky and very bold at the same time. So the greatest fear of the white group as a general thing is that blacks will return to their African stories for mental health, mental strength, and emotional wellness. We'll stop going to Jesus. We'll stop going to Allah. We'll stop going to Buddha. We'll stop going to Zoroaster. We'll go to Ra, Ma'at, Atum, Kepera, Shango, Ogun, Yemanja, Oshun. Because those stories are stitched in our DNA. And those were the stories that our ancestors used to maintain their mental health and emotional wellness. But only the more intelligent and mature of the Africans nowadays will follow this natural instinct. You don't find many white people following African stories. You don't see that as their go-to stress relief. When you see white people under stress, they call Jesus the Lord, oh God, Lord help me, God help me. They call their own system. That's perfectly fine. But I don't see them calling, oh Shango help me, oh Heru help me, oh Lord Ost, Queen Ost, Lord Osar. Why is that? Because those stories aren't for them. They may have some slight relevance because they're universal on some level, they're archetypal, but in real personal functional terms, they're not very useful to white people. So they're not going to call those powers. So, Black gay mental health starts with Black stories. This part of your brain, knit, remembers those tales from Africa. The tales of Heru, the tales of Ra, the tales of Atum, the tales of Shu, the tales of Geb. Hundreds of thousands of generations of Black people built these stories into their DNA through ritual and dedication and worshipful devotion. Do you think that's erased just because you were 400 years away and thousands of miles? No, it's still there. Now, why is she shown carrying bow and arrow? Because when you follow your own people's stories, you get mental strength. Haiti, which is a disgustingly hetero-insecure place, I have no respect for them in terms of their ignorance about gay people. But the word Haiti, is an Egyptian word, Haiti. If you look in the Wallace Budge dictionary under the word Haiti in the H's, you'll see there's a word there, Haiti. And it means the god of the two lights of the sun and the moon. That's interesting. You see, I looked at the word and I wove a story about it. The word sounds like the word Haiti, or in French, Haiti, and it talks about the sun and the moon gods. It's a place where they call upon the forces of sun and moon. What one could say are the occult forces of yin and yang. And they were the only Black people in North America area, the Northern Hemisphere, to break the shackles of white terrorism. They defeated the greatest white armies in the world. The French, the British, were whooped by the Haitian revolutionaries, and the Haitians used voodoo, the sun and the moon, the subtle powers of nature, to whoop their behinds, whoop the white armies' behinds. The white armies and the white nations came down like fire and brimstone and vilified Haiti, destroyed it, made sure it never rises again. I've got news for them, but anyway, because they didn't want any other Blacks in the North American or anywhere to use the Haitian strategy for liberation, which was voodoo. They used voodoo. Just research it. Go online, research the Haitian Revolution and voodoo as a liberation tool. What the Haitians were doing were following the stories of their ancestors, which gave them weaponry, the mental strength, the mental weaponry to connect with the forces of their stories for victory. Blacks as a group will never become unified, following Jesus. It will never happen because the story is not ours. It was not meant for us, not the way it's presented. And I mean true liberation, where our culture and our ways are elevated and respected like every other group's ways in the world have a level of respect. Okay, so I'm giving you quite the foundation for understanding mental health and emotional wellness. But I had to go through this lengthy, lengthy explanation to lay the groundwork well. Okay? So when you follow your stories, you become not only mentally healthy and emotionally healthy, but you find emotional strength. That's what these arrows and bows are about. You find fortitude. You will find a strength in Heru that Jesus can never give you. Never. You will find a strength in Osar that Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob can never give a black person. Never. And she reminds you of that. Okay, now let's move forward to some stories. Here we have what's called the genealogy tree of creation from the blacks of Kamaat, what some call Kemet. I like to refer to as Kamat, the soul of Ma'at. The soul, Ka means soul, Ma'at means love of scientific formulas on the daily. So Kamat would be the land where there was a love, the soul, the land of people whose souls loved Ma'at, of black people, because Ka means black. Okay, so here we have a story, a genetic story, a genealogy storyline. So this is the first key to gay mental health and emotional wellness in the black community, this storyline. This genealogy comes from a book called The Book of Knowing the Manifestations of Ra and of Overthrowing a Pop. Now let's discuss the title for 1 second. The Book of Knowing the Manifestations of Ra. Okay, what is Ra? Ra represents the subconscious mind. He's a general word for the energies of the subconscious. Ra. Some can call him Kundalini or life force or chi or energy, whatever. But the most useful definition is the energies of your subconscious mind, the powers of the subconscious mind. Okay? So it's called the Book of Ra, the Book of Knowing the Manifestations of Ra, the Book of Knowing the Manifestations or Dynamics of your Subconscious Mind. That's the first part of the title, comma. Then it says, and of overthrowing a pop. Now, what is a pop? A pop is deranged psychological states, a deranged brain functioning, your weirdo ways, your bizarre, psychopathic, OCD, neurotic ways, we call a pop. Your crazy, your stupidity, your dysfunction. We had a word for that. It was called a pop, the Lord of Evil. So the book's title, and they call it a creation story. But yes, it is that, but okay. There is later down the road of learning about how to control your mind, your psychology, you need to know how the universe works. But let's start with what's useful in the immediate sphere. What's useful is understanding your psychology and how it works, raw. So you're not crazy, so you're not a pop. That's what it means. The book of knowing how to be psychologically well and not crazy. That's my gay read on the text's title. The book of how to be mentally healthy and not a crazy person. Okay, now, in that book of how to be mentally healthy and not a crazy person, it discussed the birth of these parts of the brain. This part's not discussed here, but it's added, and I'll talk about it at the end. But everything in these little gray, smaller squares are discussed in that scripture. So that scripture was read by the initiates into what? What are you being initiated into? Into your brain, your subconscious ways, how to control your own psychology. Psychology manual. DSM-V 1, meaning the very first one. Okay, quickly. Atum is the part of your psychology of hope. He is hope and possibility. The first thing to mental health, this flowchart is showing you in a very African, meaning artistic and graphic manner. Not a bunch of words like Sebek and like white people like, but in pictures like black folks like. In this map, this equation, this is the first thing you should know about psychology. And down here are the later parts of psychology. So it's not only structured, it's also ordered, meaning most important, and then what comes out of that. Okay, so what's the first thing to mental health and emotional happiness? You have to understand hope and living in what's possible. If you're a psychiatrist and you don't give your client the foundation of hope that they have the potential to overcome these issues, then why bother? So first we establish in the gay community hope in ourselves and living in what's possible for our mental and emotional happiness. Now, there are some things missing in this model. I'll add them just verbally. After Atum is actually called Atum Kepera. His name is really in the text Atum Kepera. Kepera is the beetle, the scarab beetle in Egypt. He's not shown here, but I'll discuss him very quickly. So Atum means hope and what's possible. Kepera means patterns, fractal patterns. I have a video on my channel where I discuss Kepera and fractals. If you want more, just check that video out on the channel. But basically, Kepera means your life will go in patterns and will go through cycles. So the first thing in psychological mental health is the hope that you can be better, that you can do better tomorrow, and to understand your patterns, that you're not a random scattering of chaotic, bumbling things. You're walking and living as a pattern. So the next part of therapy then is helping the client, helping the gay community understand its patterns, meaning its storyline. A pattern is another word for story. There's a third part of the brain that is born, but it's not mentioned in this sequence here, called Ma'a. Ma'a, in the text, Ma'a is the force or the dynamic of formulas. So first, you establish what's possible and living in hope. Then you help the client see their patterns. Then you help them to see the equations that control their patterns, the scientific dynamics behind the patterns. We're already far from white people now. We're deep into Africa already. Okay? Then after those were made, or after the therapist or psychiatrist or counselor establishes hope that you're not without a storyline or a pattern, and that there's a rhyme and reason to why you behave the way you do, or there's a formula for it, ma'a. After that, we're born Shu and Tefnut. 'Shu' can be called the conscious mind. Tefnut, like the subconscious mind, and they must work together. So you have your external behavior, shu, conscious behavior, and the subconscious intent, tefnut. You have an outer life called shu and an inner life called tefnut. And what's the relationship between your inner subconscious behavior and your outer behavior? You must help the client understand that. Then it was said that Shu and Tefnut gave birth to two, Geb and Nut. Geb is the earth, quote unquote, god. Nut is the star goddess. Here she is the sky with little white stars on her belly, on her body. Okay, this should be a B, not a D. Geb and Nut. Okay, Geb means your external conditions. Here we learn from a psychological point of view, a psychiatry therapy point of view, how your environment, Geb, how your environment influences your behavior. So you have to help the client or the patient respect how their upbringing, their environment, their social class, the town they were born in, their parents' status and social standing, the diet that they had, the feng shui of their homes. Were they born in the hood or in Beverly Hills? How that influences the political climate, the governmental dynamics that influenced your life. That's called Geb. Nut is more your own inner nature, your own native ways that were there regardless of environment. So we have nature and nurture. Geb would be nature. I'm sorry, Nut would be nature and Geb would be nurture. Now, this Nut we call your astrology chart because she's a star goddess. So we discover your nature, the child's nature, the individual's nature, through astrotherapy, astrological psychotherapy, where we use the astrology wheel as an x-ray of the person's nature. Okay, now when we look at your environmental influences, nurture, and your native influences, your natal chart or your nature, those two joined and formed 5 other forces. So just these 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. It was first Osar, called Osiris, then Ast, called Isis here. The third born was Set. The fourth born was Heru. And the fifth born was Nebutet, or Nephthys, but we call her Nebutet in Egyptian. Okay. So these are the next 5 parts of your psychology that come out, that the client must deal with. What are these 5 parts of the brain? Well, basically, they are moods. Moods. Ast is emotional mood, like a very watery mood, very sensitive mood. Osar is a very objective mood. Nebuhet is an erotic or pleasure mood. Set is an evil mood, a bad mood. And Heru is a championship mood, a heroic mood. So these are the core moods that the client must learn about. Their reflective mood. Are you able to reflect and meditate on your life? The objective divine mood. Can you see the divine hand in your experiences? The erotic or compulsive, passionate mood, the erotic moods, your bad moods, your evil ways, and your heroic mood. This is the mood to do better. The part of you that wants to prove itself and conquer. Okay? Conquer what? Your environment. Reflect on what? Your environment. See the divine role in what? Your environment. See the impulses brought to you through your environment. See the bad mood you got from your environment. Conquer over what? Your bad nature, your chart. Reflect on what? Your chart. See the divine in your chart. See your passions in your chart. See your bad moods in your chart. You see how it works? It's a fantastic model. Better than Freud and his ego id situation, which is ridiculous. Better than Jung. Better than Maslow. Better than Dr. Spock. Nothing can match this ancient way. And when black people are given this module, they follow it very quickly. They get it very quickly. Now, this divine reflection, this divine understanding, and this erotic, passionate side joined and gave birth to Anpu or Anubis, which is your thoughts, your belief structures. And there's a whole myth, a whole knit, a whole storyline woven between these three, Osar, Nebuchadnezzar, Set, with Anpu coming in the middle. Okay? And then there were two Herus. There's Heru Saast, meaning Heru, the son of Ast. But this Heru is not her son. This is Herur, Heru the elder. This Heru is not Ast's child. Heru Saast is her child. It's a different, they have the same first name, but a different last name. Heru Ur and Ast joined, and they gave birth to the canopic jars, the four sons of Heru, which are your organs. This little dynamic here is profound. It links your mental health to the condition of your organs. How well are your organs functioning have an immense impact on your mental health and emotional happiness. If you're drinking booze, destroying your liver, that will affect your mental health and emotional stability. We call the liver Imset. His name was Imset. Has the word set in it. When the liver's off, that's where the evil likes to come through. There's a whole set of storylines going through this that the therapist, the gay kamotic therapist, learns to help people with their issues. I'm not interested in Kemet, Kamat, just to tell you how great the blacks were, how great the Nile Valley was. That's wonderful. It's important that we have that pride. But my main interest is to help you in real life, in everyday living, to help you get through your day with divinity. And this mental health, emotional happiness map is worth its weight in gold to study. Now, first you learn this book of knowing the manifestations of Ra, how your subconscious ticks, and of overthrowing a pop, you're crazy. Now, we move on to a more advanced level of mental health and emotional happiness. You can't get to this level without going first to this one. Okay? I have a video on this. It's called the Judgment Scene, I believe, or the Hall of Ma'at. I don't quite recall what I named the video, but you can search for it. The meaning of the Hall of Ma'at, I believe it's called, and it explains this in great detail. I think I spent about an hour on it. Okay, but I want to bring your mind's eye to a few dynamics here about mental health. This shows you psychological health's map in detail. The flow chart of the birth of the gods was an overall general outline of the parameters required for mental health. But when you want to get into the details of how to do that, you must look at this and the next screen. This screen and then this screen. They're actually part of the same text in the Egyptian scriptures. Okay, very quickly. Here we have a jury of 12. We have 12 brain parts called the 12 signs of the zodiac. Here we have two ancestors, your father and your mother. So mental health must engage your father's issues and your father's people's issues and your mother's line's issues and your mama's issues. It must involve the zodiac, your chart, the 12 signs here. The zodiac signs are your needs. You can't escape these 12 great needs. And you must feed these needs. You must feed them what? The scales of Ma'at, scientific formulas. You want to understand here that mental health starts with knowing mama's and papa's issues, your lineage, knowing what your deep needs are, how to feed them with Ma'at, divine scientific answers. For example, we all have a need for no stress, for calmness, for a calm day. How you address that issue. If you try to satisfy your need for stress relief through drugs, marijuana, the devil's breath, the devil's weed, marijuana is the devil's breath. Any alcohol, wine, champagne, vodka, gin, we call the devil's vomit. Whenever I see someone drinking booze, I actually see them drinking the devil's vomit. When I see someone smoking marijuana or cigarettes, I see them inhaling the devil's breath. Because if you were an intelligent person, meaning you knew the scientific impact on your body, mind, and soul of the devil's vomit and the devil's breath, you wouldn't do it. You have to be stupid to do weed, smoke cigarettes, and drink booze. You must be an idiot because if you read a book on what's happening inside of your body, every time you take a swiggle of that vomit or you inhale that death smoke, you wouldn't do it. You might as well take arsenic. It's no different than taking arsenic. It's just as stupid. So when I see someone drinking the devil's vomit or smoking the devil's weed or inhaling the devil's breath, I think you're stupid because I know what those things do to the body. And I would not do that any sooner than take arsenic just because it's cool or commercial says it's cool or whatever weird reason one justifies taking the devil's vomit and inhaling his bad breath. Okay, so the scales of Ma'at, meaning the love of scientific formulas, the love of mental balance. Mental health must embrace your heart. You have to help a person find what's in their heart and how to express that heart in a light, gracious manner like a feather, according not to a wackadoodle feeding of the need, but to a divine feeding of the need. This feather means the formulas of science, but humans didn't make those formulas. We didn't make gravity's formula or the speed of light's formula. The great scientists, we call Neters, the supreme being, made those formulas. So to love Ma'at, to love the formulas of your psychology, is to love the creator. It's the same thing. So in AA, they have, I believe, to the phrasing something like a power greater than myself. We would call that Ma'at's formulas. A person cannot have mental health without attaching to a force greater than themselves. There she is. Her name is Ma'at. Now, mental health has your mother and father understandings, your chart understandings, what's in your heart, a higher power. It has this brick, which again is a iteration of your birth brick, it's called, your destiny. You must understand your chart. You must understand Shai, which is your destiny, what we call a destiny reading. You must understand what the divine lessons, this bird here, this bob bird means, observing the divine lessons of your adventure and your challenges. And you must know what your true name is, your spiritual name, which are these goddesses deal with this, your spiritual name, and the purpose that name reveals of your life on earth. This is your amygdala here, or your aggressive emotional reactions, which create guilt, recrimination, and remorse. And this is looking at life objectively, Tehuti. So I go through this with therapists, psychiatrists, and psychologists, and I teach them how to use this tableau and talk to their clients about what it's telling them before we go into your issues. We have to first kind of look at what is your destiny reading, your Shai. What is your birth chart and its construct, your these 12 signs here in this birth brick? What is your divine name, meaning the mission you're on earth to do, the name of your mission, the name of your story? Let's talk about your mother-father issues. Let's learn to be objective here about what's going to be revealed about you. Let's find balance between your heart and what you know is right, the higher road. Let's avoid guilt, hiding, and recriminations. This Anpu here is let's talk it out. Let's be logical about it. Let's not be emotional, but let's have a phase of just looking at what's going on. And the second part means, now let's do better. Heru here means I did better. That's all Heru really means. Heru, if you want to know what it means in real terms, it simply means I rose to the occasion. I did better. Heru, Heru, Heru. I did better. So here we have you being led forward. You're becoming golden. His robe's becoming gold, meaning incorruptible, confident, being led by the I did better part of you, and comes here to the Osar part of you. What does Osar mean in English, basically? The best in you. People call Osar God, indwelling intelligence, the peacemaker. Those are all true. But after my many years of helping therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, etc., the best way to define Osar is the best in me, the best in my DNA, the best in me. Whenever you hear the word Osar, replace in your brain until it becomes second nature. Osar means, what is the best in me in this moment? When you ask that question, Osar comes to you. Okay? And finally, the most advanced levels of all of, now, just mind you very quickly, there are texts around here, these hieroglyphs here and here, surrounded hieroglyphs. And by the way, if you look at this one carefully, you'll see a cross. You see almost a cross shape, almost like what they call the Christian cross. Here's the crossbar, and you can almost see it hiding in there, because Heru is the Lord of the crossroads. That you bore your cross, you faced the challenge and took on the pain of growth. You became an adult. You grew up and took the higher road. Only adults can take the higher road. Children stay pounding their feet, whining, complaining with all their excuses. And because you were bearing your cross, you came to the best in yourself. But finally, these, let's see, will it come up? There we go. These are, I have a video on this also called the Paut series of videos. This goes into deep detail. The Zuhet is Atum, yes, or called Temu here. We saw Atum before. Recall we saw Atum, not there, where do we see Atum? Here. Atum, but if we detail him, he's part of this series of parts of your brain. This is hope outlined, how to be hopeful and find your potential 100% of the time. Okay? Then we learn about Kepler, recall I mentioned him, patterns and fractals. Here he's detailed. Okay? And here we have a version of those gods we saw before of Ast, Osar, Heru, Set, and Nebenhet. Those five, you see these five, a different form of them here in this Vesica Pisces. And then you learn the psychology of your life on earth here and of your chart here, this wheel, your chakras, your ancestors in the tree of life. You learn the Kabbalah, the psychology of Kabbalah, the psychology of the chakras, the psychology of astrology. This little symbol here called the Ma'a plinth or Ma'a pedestal would be what's called your Jed column astrology. And this Shabaka stone text is about your divine work, your job. So you see, we have gone through how to bring the Black gay community, mental health and emotional happiness. It's not a light topic. It's not a frou-frou approach. It's deep because the pain and stress is deep. You can't have a shallow answer to a deep question, to a deep issue. And so that basically wraps up this introductory lecture on Black gay community's mental health. Unless we know our story, and our story comes from African mythins, and we look at the ethics. This symbol here is ethical living. You have to have an ethical life in order to be mentally healthy. That you may be the hero who did better the next day and found the best in him or herself. What have we here? And this is the quick route to mental health. This is called the science of sonics, cymatics, how sound creates structures. This is the god called Heka, words of power. You can sign up for my Words of Power membership workshop. I'll put a link below in the comment section down on the screen, where you learn the words of power, which are really sounds that stimulate and nourish and massage specific brain centers into first common sense action, activity, then to high philosophical activity, and then lastly into psychic powers activity. So you learn a Heka. Let's say you learn the Heka Jung, which removes negativity. It belongs to a particular part of your brain. Well, you learn first, training the sound Jung, you will learn how to read the common sense ways of getting rid of negative things in your life. Just common sense things. You don't hang around criminals. You don't hang around liars. Okay, common sense. Then you keep doing Jung. You start getting very, very advanced philosophical understanding of how to avoid evil. You'll know the structure of evil and the dynamics of evil, and the philosophy of it becomes very clear to you. Then when you get that rolling, you keep doing the sound Jung, 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 you start being able to remove evil telepathically or psychically. You will see it psychically in a vision, in a dream. You will will it away with your mind, like an Xavier kind of thing, an X-Men kind of power. You can't get all three of those brain powers. The brain starts with common sense, then moves to philosophical understanding, then moves to psychic powers. It's 3 levels of mental health. Mental health on the common sense level, mental health philosophically, and mental health that is so strong it becomes psychic, meaning it can scale jump from affecting just your brain to your environment, things outside of your brain, well, that appear to be outside the brain. When you go through the philosophical side of the words of power, you learn nothing's outside of your brain. If you had a thought about something, it happened in your brain, happened in your own head. So right now, if you think about someone who's trying to do you harm, the thought occurred in your brain. You saw the person, you saw the harm they're trying to do to you in your own brain. Well, at the 3rd level of Heka, words of power, just by thinking about them being unable to hurt you, just your brain being able to conjure that image with the sound makes it happen outside of your head. But it's not really outside of your head. But that's the Heka training down the road. So this is Heka is the way, it's the kind of cheat sheet method to brain power, to mental health, and to emotional happiness. The word mantra means, manas means mind, and tra means protector. Mantra or Heka, mantra in India, mantras, the brain protector, meaning mental health. Mantra means mental health sounds. I can heal many mental issues, many emotional problems with sound very quickly. What would take a therapist years to fix, we can fix very quickly with Heka. It's a very advanced methodology of mental health and emotional wellness. So through all of these things, this is the story of how Africans get mental health, how the gay black community must get our mental health and emotional happiness. We give praise to the African ancestors from Kamat, from Kemet, who bring this to my community, to my people, to nourish and protect you. Come home to Africa. This is the only place in the world, where black gay people have a safe and solid place to develop who they are as both black and gay. It is the only sanctuary of black gay spiritual wellness, spiritual encouragement, spiritual health. The black gay community must come home. I call all of you to come to the teachings here of your ancestors. Enjoy all of the free videos on YouTube. Sign up for the classes. Go onto the webpage and buy all the books. I wrote them for you to use, so you're not alone and feeling there's no guidance to your very soul. And spread this information among our community, because I am building something here. I'm building the next black gay movement of gay spirituality of black people, ancestral spirituality. This is going to be the new source of black gay pride. Gay pride often is a very physical event where you're twirling in Daisy Dukes and partying in a parade. That has its place, but it becomes quite boring after a while and quite uninspiring. But if you've ever gone, for example, to a Two Spirits celebration, you'll notice it's a very different kind of parade. The Native American gay people, no, they're not just these physical sexual beings. That's not even how they define themselves as gay people. They call themselves two what? Two spirits. Instantly, it's a spiritual conversation. You don't find that in white gay prides or black gay prides. Remember, she's a warrioress knit. She will give you strength. She will give my people the weapons to fight back against hetero abuse and bullying of us, to fight back mentally strong, emotionally happy against oppression, marginalization, negligence, unjust laws, maltreatment, and disrespect. No other system. Jesus will not give that all to you, because you'll always have that undertone that his system hates you, because the book that he comes from says it. There will always be that doubt, but not here. Here you are powerful, you are dominant, you are alpha, you are beautiful. Here, gayness is not secondary, it is primary. Here you can find true black, gay pride, even other black groups who fight for black liberation don't include us often. They throw us out. But that's okay. They're going to learn in a couple of decades what a big mistake that was. As a black gay community, we become mentally weaponed and strong. They're going to learn if you attack us, there will be a consequence. But black gay people are very magical. We have all kinds of mystical powers. So if you turn your mouth against us on your YouTube videos or you say mean things about us, you're going to have not very good feelings about that. It won't be happy for you in terms of your own conscience. And that guilt will hopefully redeem you and make you a better person. So, Dwau for sticking it out for this lecture. Stay tuned for much more. I look forward to sharing the details of this technology with my community, going around talking to you all and seeing your faces and watching your story come to life like a lotus blooming in the Nile. Be well, be strong. Dwawend Hotepu.